Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Fox, and I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Texas and an expert in the area of personality disorders. And today I thought I would make a video talking about the system that is in place for narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, specifically how it relates to those folks. Now, all of us are in an interpersonal system, an interpersonal circle, but I want to specifically address borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder and how that works. So I want to start off first by talking about what system theory is. What am I talking about when I talk about the system? And so first of all of us are in an interpersonal circle, an interpersonal system. And within that system, we all have particular roles that we fall into. Now, there are identified different role types that I'll talk about real briefly. And as I go through it, see if you fall into some of these categories. Okay? So the first one is called the family crucible. And this is that guilt receptacle, is what it's called. So this individual, all of the family's problems and contempt and failures and issues and the imperfections are put onto this individual. And he or she is typically the family scapegoat, often has this internal sense of rejection, guilt, jealousy, and anger. And that's the family crucible. Now, another family role type is also the avoider. Now, the avoider, this type of person often shuts down when there's a lot of chaos, will often be in the periphery. If there's abuse in the family system, they tend to take a very passive role or avoid that system, has difficulty developing coping strategies to avoid stress when it occurs, as well as when they're in threatening situations, they tend to avoid. So you see a lot of avoidance in their behavior, and they tend to have a sense of emptiness, are often feeling alone, afraid, depressed, and a lot of uncertainty in that avoider family role. Now, another family role is called the hero. And the hero, this is when that individual does things to draw attention to him or herself in order to take the negative consequences away from others. And they are inclined to take care of others and excel, to help maybe the parent or caregiver look and feel good, right? They want everybody to be okay. And they often harbor this sense of guilt, hurt, and insecurity about who he or she is and the pain that others are experiencing. So that is the hero. Now, another type is called the enabler. Now, the enabler, they often work to maintain the status quo with the narcissistic family structure by encouraging and pacifying those negative behaviors. They'll often do anything to avoid the parent or caregiver becoming upset or hurt, owning to their negative narcissistic views and parenting style. Okay? So they often feel very angry inside, hurt, guilt, insecurity about his or her life choices and inability to satisfy everyone all the time. And the rebel. Now, the rebel family type, this is the individual that's prone to anger and acting out. He or she pushes things to the extreme, may self-sabotage in order to hurt the parent or caregiver and show his or her contempt. They often feel angry inside, resentful, afraid about the future and about the unpredictable way family members treat him or her. Now, another family type is called the mascot. And the mascot, the individual falls in line with the narcissistic pathology or borderline pathology that's in the family and tends not to cause problems, will try to be pleasant all the time. He or she tries to be the family favorite, to control internal fear, anxiety, and insecurity. And that's the mascot. Now, the other type is called the healthy. Now, this is what all of us aspire to, right? This idea of what the healthy is. Now, the healthy, this is an individual who's able to appropriately assert him or herself, receives an appropriate amount of love and attention, is challenged to grow into an independent and thoughtful individual, and has a sense of security, confidence, tends to feel happy and thankful for the life they have and the people in it. Okay? So all of these different family roles. So as I went through, were you able to be like, oh, that sounds like me, that sounds like me? Now recognize that we're not all going to fit into these nice roles individually, because we may be different roles with different people. Okay? We may have different roles at work, school, family, friends, significant others. But I think that it is important, particularly for those that are along the narcissistic and borderline spectrum, to understand which roles they're falling into. And with my clients, we often work on role identification and definition. And how does that help them build their level of awareness and insight? And I think that that's really, really important, because one of those issues that a lot of folks have that have narcissistic borderline traits, or the full personality disorder of narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, is that impaired insight, that lack of awareness of self and other. And I think building that sense of awareness is very important, because as you build that and you build coping strategies along with it, you are better able to master your environment. And it takes time, and it certainly isn't easy, but it is certainly possible to do that. So let's talk about that interpersonal circle, that interpersonal system. And what happens is, so let's say, for example, that you fall into the family crucible role, right? So this was that guilt receptacle, the problem child, that individual. And let's say that you begin therapy, or you learn some strategies and you start to do things differently. And when you start to do things differently, other people, because of the role you fall into, see you in a particular way. And it's a very unconscious process, the way we see people, right? We think about the people that you know, and don't you expect them to behave in a certain way? If they start to behave differently, what's interesting is that unconsciously you behave in a way to put that person back into their role. Well, the family crucible in our example, that happens to them as well. For the borderline personality disorder individuals, or those with traits, when they start to behave in a more healthy, functional manner, they start to experience a lot of pressure. Now, it's not always cognizant. The individuals aren't always cognizant. The system is not cognizant, but that system wants homeostasis. Human beings want to operate within expectations so that they're not surprised, so they don't feel threatened, so they have less anxiety, less depression, and feel like they have greater control over their life. So when we operate outside of that role, you're going to get pressure to go back to that role. And if we're talking about borderline personality behaviors, narcissistic personality behaviors, as you start to do things differently, your system pushes you back to fall into that role. Let's use another example, substance abuse. For my clients that often have substance abuse issues, family system and systems theory is very prominent in addictions. And so let's say that an individual, right, goes to treatment, and it is successful, and they're able to stay sober. And then Thanksgiving comes along. And when it is Thanksgiving, so the family all gets together, and let's say it's a drinking family, right? And a drinking family is that there's alcohol around, and a few people may drink heavily, or everybody drinks heavily, or however many people. But this individual is identified, right? And part of being that family crucible is they're also the alcoholic, okay? They're also the heavy drinker. They're also the one whose life is so erratic and crazy, okay? So what happens is, now they've gone to treatment and they're currently sober. Thanksgiving comes around, and then everybody's together, and this person is like, no, I'm clean, I'm sober, I'm doing really well. This isn't, I don't want to drink anymore, so on and so forth. Now, those people that are in the family system, they see that as threatening, perhaps because it's making them question their own alcohol use, drug use. Okay? It's making them feel unsafe, insecure, could be triggering some of their own family system roles that they feel that they will be forced to question, which they don't want to do. So what they do, this is all unconscious, so what they do unconsciously, and some people may do it consciously, but I believe that most people do it unconsciously, is that they start to put pressure. That when they start to become uncomfortable, they start to put pressure on that individual. And what they start to do is they start to ridicule and sometimes antagonize. And for example, to go back to our substance abuse individual who's now clean, they may say things like, oh, look at you, you know everything. Oh, all of a sudden you're sober and you're so much better than us. You're doing so much better. Or you're so perfect. Or the one for a borderline personality disorder individual that is not being overly reactive, that is being more process focused and reasoning with their response, what happens is they get a lot of pressure from their family system to behave in borderline manner. And when I say borderline manner, that's for those individuals that are highly reactive, the screamers, the yellers, the cutters, the runners, and by running, I mean like run out of the house, run into the bathroom, have fits, anger outbursts, things of that nature. So they start to antagonize that individual until, right, that person falls back into their family role. So for the substance abuser, right, they're telling them how great they are, how they know everything, all this other stuff. And finally they're like, well, heck with it. And they start drinking. For the borderline individual, they get so much pressure, and I see this with a lot of my clients, they get so much pressure to fall back into that borderline role, okay? Or the family crucible role, right? And all of these different system roles we talked about factor in to your borderline narcissistic overall behaviors as well. So they're pushed back into that role. And lo and behold, what do? They have an anger outburst. They start to react. They start to, right? And then that family member or that other individual says, see, you're no better. You're no better than us. You're exactly who you were. So stop trying to fool us and make us think you're somebody who can keep it together, somebody who can stay sober and all these other things, because you're pushed back into that role. And that becomes that unconscious attempt at homeostasis, so that you fall into that role and everything is calm and perfect. And this happens at work, it happens at school, it happens with your friends, it happens with your family, it happens in every context that you have. And it can happen inside yourself, that you have your own expectations of who you are and how you see the world, and to work outside of that is very difficult. And sometimes that requires, and I can potentially do this as another video if you're interested, about what I call letting go of your best friend. And when borderline personality disorder is your best friend because you're so close to it, because it gives you answers, although they're unhealthy answers, that you end up, right, being very afraid to change. And that's understandable. A lot of my clients have that issue, okay? So what I did here is, if you're interested in exploring this issue, doing things differently for yourself, I've attached a worksheet. I made a worksheet. I love making up different activities and worksheets. So I will put the link in the comment section if you're interested. And the first part is it's gonna look like this, okay? And what this is that in the center of the worksheet, it says you. And then there's another circle and then a larger outer circle. And what you're going to do is you're going to define your interpersonal circle, because the people that are closest to you are the ones that tend to have the greatest impact on you. Okay? And that's not necessarily proximity, physical proximity, but we can say it's emotional proximity, which those that you feel emotionally close to. Okay? So you'll put those in the inner circle. And these are people that have a lot of impact on you. Okay? And then on the outer circle, these are people that are once removed. Okay? So they're not that close, but they could have some influence. Could be a boss you're not that close to. Could be an acquaintance that you know, whomever it is. Someone, maybe if you're going to school, someone you only see in class. Things like that. So that those people would go in the outer circle, because what I want my clients to do is to identify who has the greatest impact, to push you into those system and interpersonal roles, right? And who's in your interpersonal circle, so that you have that awareness. So you know that if you're going to change, this is somebody who may be putting some implicit pressure on you to go back into one of those system roles that we talk about that factor into those overall narcissistic and borderline behaviors and presentations. Okay? So then we also have part 2 of the worksheet as well. And in part 2 of the worksheet, okay, you'll see that there are some exploratory questions as well. The first one it lists all those roles, and also in the link I'll also list out all of these different system role types, so you can read them. I don't expect you to memorize them, obviously, from the video, so you can read them and you can get a better sense of what they are. And then it's going to ask you to identify which of these roles you think apply to you today, where you are. Because as people change and as they grow, they go into different system roles, right? Because the idea is, particularly with the folks that I work with, I want to move you from whatever that dysfunctional system role is to a more functional system role, to move you to the healthy system role. Okay, and then from there, what we're going to do is we identify people or situations that drive you to fall into your system role. Okay, so think about it. Those maladaptive system roles, who pushes you to do that? Mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin, spouse, whoever it may be. Okay, and then what about situations? Situations also put us in there. What if you're at the checkout counter, okay, and you're at the grocery store and you're about to check out and they turn off the light on you? What is your initial reaction? Okay? I have clients that become very, very agitated with that because they have time constraints, childcare issues, and work, and other types of things. And so if they had that light come off, and that set them off. And then there were other problems that were subsequent to that, to their reaction of screaming and yelling at the kid at the cash register, and it just exploded from there. And what happened is that was a situation that drove that person to fall into their particular system role. Okay, so we want to look at individuals as well as situations. So this will have you do that as well to explore it. And then that last question is identify behaviors you can do instead of falling into your old roles. What can push you into the healthy roles? And I'm going to give you some tips and some suggestions here that might be able to help you. Okay, the first thing is, and I teach this with a lot of my clients, it's called assertive avoidance. And I really like assertive avoidance because what it is it lets us know that you don't have to be in conflict in order to feel like you've managed an issue well. Okay? And a lot of men, I think, have this issue. A lot of my male clients have issues because they have a conceptualization that you only win by fighting and decimating your opponent. And that actually isn't true. Avoidance, assertive avoidance, is knowing when to engage. Think about your military generals. Do they fight every battle all over the world? No, they don't. It's selective. They choose which battles to fight because what they're doing is they want to win overall. They want to win the war, not just win the battle. So it's strategic. So assertive avoidance is recognizing when to engage, but also when to avoid. And that you don't have to decimate your opponent, that you can assertively communicate your view, communicate your point, okay, and not become violent or verbally aggressive, whatever it is. It's being assertive and going and getting around that issue. The other one, it's called relaxation when triggered. And relaxation when triggered is exactly what it sounds like, is that you slowly repeat a calm word to yourself, such as relax, take it easy. Repeat it to yourself while you're breathing deeply. Okay? I'm a big foodie, so mine is actually, one of my calming images is actually a blueberry muffin. I love blueberry muffins, and I have this image of this pristine blueberry muffin. And sometimes when I feel myself, getting initially agitated, whatever it may be, is I will imagine that muffin and take a deep breath, and I may say to myself, sometimes blueberry, sometimes muffin, and whatever it may be. So yours could be more direct and specific, which could be relax, just take it easy, right? Or it could be something associated with an image that helps you calm down and relax as well. Okay? Now another type is called cognitive restructuring. Okay? And when we do cognitive restructuring, it is reminding yourself that getting angry is not going to fix the situation, okay? That it won't make you feel better, that usually you'll have a short-term reward with a long-term consequence, okay? And what happens is a lot of folks with personality disorders, they fall into this cycle of short-term reward, but it ends up with long-term consequence. And that's what we want to avoid. You want short-term rewards with long-term rewards. That's the goal. And that's certainly where I try to get my clients, to get them there as well. Okay, so cognitive restructuring, you're seeing it differently, recognizing that anger is not going to help you. And you may actually feel worse after you engage. So it's seeing the situation differently. Okay? Another way is changing your environment. And this is that problems and responsibilities can weigh on you, okay, and make you feel like you're like you're trapped, that you're stuck. You may fall into what's called like a person situation trap, which is you're in these situations and you're trying to get out, but you feel like you can't get out. But if you use the other assertive avoidance that we talked about, and if you can cognitively restructure, it's putting all of these strategies together to help you to get out of that stressful situation, that difficult situation. Changing your environment can help you, okay? And sometimes it's also recognizing, and this is difficult, and I've thought about doing a video on this as well, which is accept that you and the others may need to leave. And sometimes when I work with my folks, particularly along that borderline spectrum, is that allowing people to self-select out of your life. And that as you grow and develop, because of that interpersonal system, they don't want to see you any differently. And sometimes we have to allow those people to self-select out of our life, and that's okay. But folks that tend to have borderline personality disorder, some narcissistic personality and trait folks as well, but I see it more with my clients along the borderline spectrum, is that they have a hard time because it triggers senses of emptiness and abandonment when people self-select out. But those people need to self-select out, and they need to go, because it's a changing of your environment, because you're on a pathway of the healthy system role, and you want to build a social support system that encourages that healthy system role. And the last one is timing. We have to know ourselves, what I talked about earlier, about building that sense of insight, right? So if you tend to have if you're not a morning person, right, is what they call it. If you're not a morning person, you're really agitated in the morning, you don't like to get up, or you get up very slowly, and you don't want to hear people talking to you and stuff like that, that's not the time to engage in difficult issues. And that's the time to be aware that you are at a higher likelihood to be triggered. So be aware of your time of day, of your timing, okay, and where that falls. And that can help you as well, is recognizing that, okay? I want to thank you very much. I really hope that you found this helpful. Please leave me any comments or suggestions that you may have. And again, please check out the link, and I hope this is helpful for you. And thank you to everyone who's been watching the videos. I certainly appreciate that. And thank you very much. And please take care. Be well. Thank you. Bye-bye.